People say cities never sleep, but mine definitely did. By 10 p.m., the streets around my apartment felt like a forgotten movie set. Quiet, empty, and a little too dark for comfort. I worked late shifts at a downtown cafe, the kind that played soft indie music and smelled like roasted beans and vanilla syrup. Most nights I walked the long way home. It wrapped around the busier streets, passing the fire station and the all-night laundromat, where the hum of dryers made me feel less alone. But that autumn, everything in my life felt heavier. School, work, debt, the pressure of being on my own, it all stacked on me like wet blankets. I kept telling myself I was fine, just tired, just stretched thin. Still, one night after closing, exhaustion got the better of me. I stood at the intersection staring at both paths and thought, it's just 5 minutes shorter. I'll be okay. The shortcut went through Willow Bend Playground, a place parents stopped taking their kids years ago after some trouble nobody ever fully explained. Teenagers vandalized it, or maybe it was something worse. Rumors always changed depending on who told them. Either way, I had avoided it since moving to the neighborhood. But that night, my feet hurt. The wind cut through my jacket and I wanted nothing but my bed. So I turned toward the playground, telling myself it was just a patch of land. Nothing else. I didn't know then that a single tired decision would change the way I walked home forever. The metal gate creaked as I pushed it open. The air inside felt colder, and even before I saw him, the man on the bench, I had the unsettling feeling that the playground wasn't empty. I tightened my grip on my backpack strap and stepped carefully across the cracked pavement. The swing squeaked even though the wind had died down. The slide leaned to one side like it couldn't hold itself up anymore. Everything looked abandoned, except for him. He sat on the far bench, hunched over, hands dangling between his knees. His thin gray jacket seemed useless against the cold. At first I thought he might be homeless, maybe just resting. I didn't want to be rude or make him feel watched, so I tried to slip behind the rusted merry-go-round and leave him in peace. But when I was almost past, he lifted his head sharply. His eyes were wide, like he had just surfaced from drowning. "Don't let them see you," he whispered. I stopped. I'm sorry, what? His gaze darted past me, toward the tree line on the opposite side of the playground. His voice trembled. "Keep walking. Don't run. They follow when you run." For a moment I didn't move. I wanted to assume he was confused, maybe going through something, but his expression wasn't wild or unstable. It was terrified. Controlled terror, the kind you feel when you know exactly what you're afraid of. Against every instinct, I turned to look. At first, I saw only the trees. Dark, dense, shifting slightly in the wind. Then I spotted them. Two figures, tall, still, standing just inside the shadows. They weren't talking. They weren't swaying. Just watching. A chill slid down my spine so fast it stole my breath. The man whispered urgently, "Go. Now." I forced my legs to move. One slow step, then another. I didn't run. Not yet. The whole way across the playground I could feel them. Their eyes, their stillness, like pressure on my back. My heartbeat thudded in my ears so hard it almost drowned out everything else. I didn't dare look again. I focused on the exit gate ahead, trying to keep my pace steady the way the man told me. When I finally reached the street, I sucked in a shaky breath and risked turning around. The man on the bench was gone, and the two figures were closer, no longer buried in the trees but standing at the edge of the playground, just inside the glow of the single street lamp. Still unmoving, still watching. I didn't think. I ran. My legs carried me faster than I'd moved in years. 5 long blocks felt endless. Every sound, a car in the distance, a trash bin rattling, my own footsteps, felt like someone following. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, slammed the door behind me, and locked it twice. For days after, I didn't open my curtains. I avoided the windows entirely. I jumped at footsteps in the hallway and couldn't pass the building's lobby alone at night without my heart racing. I tried to tell myself the figures were just guys messing around. Teenagers. Maybe the man on the bench was paranoid and scared me into seeing things that weren't there. That explanation felt safer. But late one night as I lay awake, I heard footsteps outside my building. Slow. Deliberate. Too controlled to be random. They didn't pause. Didn't knock. Just passed by like someone was sweeping the block with their presence. Looking. Searching. That night, sleep never came. By the end of the week, the playground incident had twisted itself into my routine thoughts. I kept replaying the man's voice in my head. Don't let them see you. Why had he said that? Who were they? Why were they just standing there? I needed answers. So one afternoon during daylight, I walked the long way back to the cafe and stopped at the playground entrance. The gate creaked with the same rusty groan. Everything looked the same. Empty, still, abandoned. But sunlight made it feel almost normal. I walked to the bench where the man had sat. The wood was splintered, weathered. Nothing unusual. But then I noticed something beneath it. A torn piece of paper wedged between the boards. I pulled it free. It was part of a bus schedule, the ink smudged from moisture. On the back, written in shaky blue pen, were 5 words. They wait for the tired. I swallowed hard. That night, back at the cafe, I asked my coworker, Mike, if he knew anything about the playground. He shrugged. Teens used to cause trouble there. Some guy went missing a few years back, I think. People blamed gangs. He paused, lowering his voice. But my brother said he once saw 2 men standing in the trees late at night, not moving, just watching. I forced a laugh. Probably drug dealers. Mike nodded, but his face suggested he wasn't convinced. Something in my stomach twisted. If other people had seen those figures too, then it wasn't just exhaustion messing with me. On my walk home that evening, I felt watched again, even on the long route. A pair of headlights slowed behind me before speeding up. A shadow shifted behind a porch across the street. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I was just scared enough to see ghosts in the shape of people. But instinct, cold, primal instinct, told me this was something real. 2 nights later, I closed the cafe alone. The streets were unusually silent, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. I stuck to the long route, telling myself I'd never take the shortcut again no matter how tired I was. Halfway home, I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Matching my pace. I stopped. They stopped. I turned, every muscle tight, expecting to see someone there. But the sidewalk behind me was empty. I walked faster. The footsteps started again. Behind me, then beside me, then ahead of me, like the sound was circling. By the time I reached my building, fear was chewing through every thought. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. That's when I saw them. Across the street, under the dim glow of a flickering lamp, 2 tall figures standing perfectly still, watching. Their silhouettes hadn't changed since that night. The same height, the same posture, the same unnerving stillness. Like shadows pretending to be people. One of them took a single step forward. That was enough. I rushed inside and didn't leave my apartment until morning. The next day, I reported what I saw to the local police. They logged my statement but didn't seem too concerned. Probably because I couldn't describe faces. Probably because they never moved aggressively. Probably because fear doesn't count as evidence. But I know what I saw. And even now, sometimes late at night, the footsteps return. They pass by my building slowly, searching, patient, as though waiting for me to make another tired mistake. I never walk alone after dark anymore. Some warnings aren't given without reason. I've spent years on the road for work, sales meetings, conferences, last-minute trips that always seemed more urgent on paper than in real life. Long drives never bothered me. In fact, they used to give me a strange comfort. It was the only time I felt completely alone with my own thoughts and no one expecting anything from me. But ever since the night of that storm on Highway 41, I haven't been able to drive long distances without checking my mirrors way too often. I remember that day clearly. I had wrapped up a 3-hour meeting in Cedar Falls and decided to drive home instead of booking a hotel. It was late, but the forecast said light rain. Nothing about a thunderstorm. I figured I could make good time and sleep in my own bed. Seemed harmless. The storm rolled in faster than I expected. 1 minute the sky was gray. The next it opened up like a faucet. Lightning cracked across the fields, lighting everything in short, violent bursts. The wipers could barely keep up. It felt like driving through a curtain of water. My GPS said I had 38 miles left before home. I kept telling myself, just an hour. You can do an hour. But as I got deeper into Highway 41's empty stretch, forests on one side, farmland on the other, I started feeling uneasy. Storms had a way of making even familiar places feel wrong. I turned down the radio to focus on the road, gripping the wheel tighter. The sound of the rain on the roof was deafening. When I saw those hazard lights blinking in the distance, dim, flickering through the downpour, I didn't think much of it. Not yet. I had no idea that stopping, or even slowing down, could have changed everything. As I approached the stranded sedan, I eased off the gas. Even through the rain, I could tell the car was parked at a weird angle. Front wheel on the shoulder, back end slightly in the lane. Its hazard lights blinked weakly, like the battery was dying. Then I saw her. A woman stood beside the car, soaked from head to toe, waving both arms urgently. Her clothes clung to her like she'd been out there a while. She looked desperate, terrified. That alone made me pull up beside her. I cracked the window just an inch, rain instantly spraying through. "Ma'am? Are you all right?" She stepped closer, breath shaking. Please, my husband's hurt. He collapsed. I can't move him. I don't know what to do." Her voice broke in the middle of the sentence. I felt a punch of panic. I didn't want to leave someone stranded, not in a storm like that. But something felt wrong. The inside of the car behind her was completely dark. No dome light, no movement, no shadow of a person. "Is he breathing?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a moment, but long enough. Lightning struck, bright and violent. In that flash, the world turned white, and I saw them. 2 silhouettes, crouched behind the back of the sedan, not moving, watching. When the sky went dark again, they vanished into the shadows. My pulse hammered. My hand hovered over the lock button inside the car. The woman stepped closer. Too close. "Can you unlock your door? I just need help getting him out." Her voice was still shaking, but the fear I first heard in it felt different now. Controlled. Performed. The hair on my arm stood up. Something inside me whispered, "Don't open that door." She reached for the handle. I didn't think. I floored the accelerator. The car fishtailed slightly as the tires fought for grip on the wet pavement. I swerved around the sedan, narrowly missing its bumper. In my mirror, the woman stumbled back, and the 2 silhouettes shot out onto the road. They weren't walking. They were running. Fast. My stomach dropped. I pushed the pedal harder, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Behind me, the figures kept up longer than they should have. I saw the flash of another vehicle's headlights deeper in the tree line. A dark SUV I hadn't noticed before, its engine revving to life. "Hell no," I muttered, shaking. "Not tonight." Raindrops hammered the roof. Lightning continued to strobe the sky in chaotic bursts. Every flash showed me those figures getting smaller in the distance, but they were still following. The SUV pulled out from the trees, then slowed, like whoever was in it was trying not to be obvious. My breathing turned shallow. I wasn't sure if I was escaping some setup or if I had just imagined the whole thing. But the way my instincts screamed at me made the answer pretty clear. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with one hand, keeping the wheel steady with the other. 911, what's your emergency? This is Leo Carter. I'm on Highway 41. I think someone staged an accident. They tried to get me out of my vehicle. The dispatcher asked for details. I tried to explain between shaky breaths, watching the SUV's headlights grow dimmer behind me. When I finally reached the main intersection near a gas station, I pulled in and parked under the bright canopy lights. I stayed in the car, doors locked, engine running, until 2 police cruisers arrived. The storm kept pounding, but inside those lights, I finally felt like the darkness had less teeth. The officers took my statement while the storm rolled on, thunder rumbling like it was warning all of us to stay inside. One officer, a tall guy with a salt and pepper mustache, took notes as I talked. "You're not the first one to report something like this," he said quietly. "Group's been pulling stunts on empty highways, fake breakdowns, fake injuries, anything to get a good Samaritan to step out of their car." I swallowed hard. "So, what would have happened if I got out?" He didn't answer immediately. He just shut his notebook. That silence told me more than any words. "Good thing you trusted your gut," he finally said. "People freeze up or convince themselves they're overreacting. You didn't." That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I bought coffee inside the gas station just to have something warm to hold. My hands trembled so badly I almost spilled it. Every time a car pulled into the lot, I flinched at the headlights. When the officers left, I sat in my car for another 10 minutes before I could make myself drive home. Even then, I stuck to well-lit roads, staying as far from the tree line as possible. That night, I lay in bed listening to rain hit the windows and replayed the woman's face. Her soaked clothes, her shaking voice. If someone had told me the whole thing was staged before I experienced it myself, I probably wouldn't have believed them. The world always feels safer until something cracks it open. The next morning, I woke with the same thought looping through my mind. It could have been me. Weeks passed, but the memory of that storm never loosened its grip. Every detail stayed sharp. The way the lightning flashed, the silhouettes crouched behind the car, the woman stepping too close. Some nights I woke up gasping, convinced someone was standing outside my window. I told my coworkers the story. Some looked horrified, some skeptical. One guy joked, "Man, you watch too many crime shows." But I didn't care what anyone thought. I knew what I saw. I also knew how close I'd come to making a fatal mistake. A month later, police announced they had arrested a small crew responsible for multiple staged highway incidents across 3 counties. They found ropes, handcuffs, tools, things I still don't like to think about. When the news report came on, my stomach twisted. I muted the TV and stared at the wall for a long time. That night, I drove to a parking lot overlooking the fields outside my town. I rolled the window down, letting the cold air hit my face. I thought about how many times I'd stopped to help strangers before that night, never once imagining something could be a setup. I still want to believe most people are good, but I've learned that trusting your instincts doesn't make you paranoid. It keeps you alive. Now, when I'm driving late at night, I keep my doors locked, phone charged, and distance from anything that feels off. I still help people when I can, but only in ways that don't put me in danger. It's a balance, a new one. Highway 41 looks the same as it always did, but every time I pass that stretch, my chest tightens. Because I know the rain, the dark, and a small group of desperate people almost changed my life forever. Kindness should never come at the cost of your safety. Trust your instincts, stay alert, and remember, helping someone doesn't mean putting yourself in harm's way. People assume danger always announces itself, shouting, flashing, warning you ahead of time. But in my experience, real danger shows up quietly, slipping into the spaces where you're least alert. Before that night, I never thought twice about walking home after midnight. My town wasn't exactly crime-free, but it wasn't the kind of place where you expected trouble either. I had just left my friend Tyler's apartment after a long movie marathon. It was humid enough that the air felt like soup, and all I wanted was my bed and an ice-cold fan. My place was only 10 minutes away, and the fastest path cut under that old abandoned railway bridge. Sure, people warned about it, kids vandalized it, older folks crossed the street whenever they got near, but I'd walked through it 100 times, day and night. Nothing ever happened to me. I started down the dim street, listening to the hum of insects and the occasional passing car. Halfway down, I noticed a man behind me, far enough to pretend he wasn't following, close enough to make it obvious. He matched my pace perfectly. I sped up. He sped up. I stopped to tie my shoe. He stopped too. Every quiet instinct I had suddenly woke up. The street lamp above buzzed like a dying fly. My shirt stuck to my back with sweat. I kept walking, trying to look casual, even though my heartbeat felt like it was climbing into my throat. And that was when my phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. I don't usually answer those, but something told me I needed to. I pressed the phone to my ear, already expecting a scammer or a wrong number. Instead, a voice slid through the speaker, strained, whispering, like someone was hiding while they talked. "Don't go under the bridge," the voice said. "Cross the street now." Before I could respond, the call cut off. I stopped walking, pulse hammering. I stared at my phone screen. No caller ID. My mouth went dry. I looked behind me. The man was still there, closing the distance between us. He didn't look in a hurry. He didn't look lost. He looked like he was waiting for me to keep walking. The entrance to the underpass loomed ahead, a dark concrete tunnel tagged with layers of faded graffiti. Not a single light worked inside. I'd always hated how the darkness swallowed everything, even footsteps. I swallowed hard. Whoever had called me knew exactly where I was and what I was about to do, and they sounded terrified for me. Keeping my breathing steady, I crossed the street, pretending to check my phone like nothing happened. My shoes scraped the pavement softly. I didn't dare look at the man behind me. He walked straight into the tunnel. I slowed, hiding behind a parked car, watching. His figure disappeared into the shadows beneath the bridge. Then, seconds later, a muffled commotion echoed inside. A grunt, a sharp gasp, something heavy hitting concrete. Then footsteps. Fast ones. The man sprinted out of the tunnel like something was chasing him. True panic in his movements. He looked over his shoulder once, then bolted down the street and vanished into the night. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold my phone. Whoever called me hadn't been wrong. The moment the man was gone, I hurried home as fast as I could without breaking into a full-on run. Every shadow looked like it might move. Every parked car felt like a hiding place for someone watching. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, cursing under my breath when they slipped from my sweaty hands. Inside, I locked every door, then locked them again. My heart refused to settle. I kept replaying the call in my mind, how the voice sounded, how urgent it had been. I tried calling the number back. "Number not found," my phone said. Great. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak in the apartment felt like a warning. Every car passing outside made my stomach twist. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled me under. The next morning, sunlight didn't help. My phone buzzed again, this time with a neighborhood alert app notification. Police activity near the old railway bridge. Area closed until further notice. I threw on shoes and walked toward the corner near my street. Yellow police tape fluttered in the humid breeze. 2 officers stood near the tunnel entrance. News vans arrived. Neighbors whispered in clusters like birds on a wire. I overheard fragments. Someone found inside. Not saying anything yet. Heard it was a mugger. Went missing sometime last night. My blood chilled. Had the mystery caller known something was waiting for me inside that tunnel? Or someone? A reporter asked police for details. They declined. I walked home slowly, feeling that same uneasy distance between myself and the rest of the world, like I'd stepped out of my normal life and into something darker. And whoever warned me, they had vanished without a trace. The following days felt unreal. I went through my routines, work, errands, meals, But every quiet moment pulled me back to that voice, that man, that tunnel. I kept wondering whether the voice belonged to someone nearby, someone watching, or someone who knew the man following me. Tyler tried to reassure me. "Probably just a prank," he said over coffee. "Weird coincidence." "Coincidence doesn't stop a guy from walking into a tunnel 2 seconds before something goes down," I replied. He didn't have an answer for that. I started asking myself uncomfortable questions. Who would care enough to warn me? Why call from a blocked number? How did they know my name? Or did they? Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just saw me heading toward danger and took a chance. Part of me wondered if the caller was the one inside the tunnel, the one the mugger ran from. But that didn't make total sense either. If they were inside, how did they have a signal? Why call instead of shouting? That thought kept me awake more nights than I'd like to admit. The police eventually released a statement saying only that an ongoing investigation was underway and that no threat to the public remained, which sounded like code for something happened, but we're not telling you. One evening I walked past the bridge again, this time in broad daylight. The tunnel was still taped off. Old graffiti glowed under the sun. The place looked normal, almost harmless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, had been waiting there that night, and that I had been a target. Some invisible thread had pulled me away just in time. A week after everything happened, the police finally removed the tape from the bridge. Life in the neighborhood moved on. Kids rode bikes past it without fear. Joggers ran under it like it was nothing more than shade. But I couldn't bring myself to walk through it again. Not ever. One evening, I sat on my balcony as the sun sank behind the rooftops, listening to cicadas buzz in the thick summer air. My phone lay beside me, silent. For the first time since that night, I opened my contacts and scrolled through every number. Old coworkers, spam calls, relatives I never talked to. Not a single one matched the call from that night. I whispered into the quiet, "Who were you?" No answer came, of course. Maybe I'd never know. Maybe that person didn't want to be known. Maybe they couldn't. But I do know this. The call wasn't random, and it wasn't an accident. Whoever it was had saved my life. Some things stay with you the rest of your days, not just the fear, but the understanding that the world holds more mysteries, more unseen dangers, and sometimes more unseen protectors than you think. I don't walk home late at night anymore. I take the long way, the safe way. I listen to my instincts, even when they whisper, and every now and then my phone buzzes with an unknown number. I never ignore it. Not after that night. I'd been working the night shift at Dayton Press for nearly 5 years. The plant's whirring machines, the scent of ink, and the constant hum of fluorescent lights had become a second home. But December nights were different. They cut deeper than the chill, making the world feel suspended, like even time itself had frozen. That night, when I finally clocked out at 3 a.m., the industrial park looked like a ghost town. Corrugated metal siding rattled in the wind, and distant security lights blinked sporadically, barely keeping the darkness at bay. My Jeep's heater wheezed, producing warmth in slow, grudging waves, while the roads stretched ahead, empty and fog-choked. I took the back roads home out of habit. 40 minutes of near silence, bordered by farmland and thick forest, places that swallowed headlights like they had a life of their own. Around mile marker 112, a curve in the road drew my attention. At first, I thought it was a plastic bag tangled in the wind, but the outline was too precise. It was a stroller, pink blanket draped neatly, standing upright in my lane. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. My pulse jumped. My instincts screamed that it wasn't just a misplaced item. It was deliberate. I slowed to a crawl, trying to see around the fog. Movement flickered in the trees to the right. Someone, or something, was watching me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The fog thickened, curling around my headlights like smoke. I knew instinctively that if I stepped out, I'd be walking straight into danger. I edged my Jeep back, scanning for escape routes. Then I saw it. A figure stepping into the road behind me. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening as dread settled in, cold and undeniable. I realized, almost immediately, that I was trapped. The stroller wasn't an accident. Someone had chosen this spot for a reason. The curve, the fog, the isolation. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I could see a second figure emerging from the woods behind me, moving deliberately, slow but confident, like a predator testing its prey. The thought of opening the door, stepping out, even to inspect the stroller, made my stomach turn. I fumbled for my phone. 1 bar. No data. Nothing. My glove compartment yielded only a dull pocket knife, more symbolic than practical. I whispered to myself, "Just drive. Just get out." I edged the Jeep forward, careful to avoid the stroller, the tires scraping the edge of the ditch. I caught movement in my peripheral vision, a broad shadow flinching behind a tree, but the fog swallowed it before I could identify it. My pulse was deafening. Every instinct screamed danger. The men weren't desperate. They were patient, methodical. Whoever put the stroller there had done it countless times, refining it until it looked convincing, innocuous, like a simple human error. My chest felt tight, adrenaline flooding my system as I shifted into drive and slammed my foot on the accelerator. The Jeep fishtailed, hugging the ditch before straightening. Behind me, a shout echoed, sharp and frustrated. I didn't dare glance back. I counted the seconds in my head, each one stretched into eternity. My mind raced through what-ifs. What if I had stopped earlier? What if I had gotten out? They were professionals, predators disguised by an ordinary object, and the fog was their partner, the road their hunting ground. 20 minutes later, I skidded into a 24-hour gas station, breathless, shaking. The fluorescent lights inside felt too bright, too safe. The overnight cashier jolted awake, blinking at me as I stumbled to the counter. "Call the sheriff," I managed, voice shaking, fingers fumbling with the phone. She picked up the line, her curiosity mixing with concern. An hour later, a deputy arrived, quiet and professional. He listened to my story, nodding slowly, like he'd heard similar things before. "Objects in lanes, figures hiding nearby," he said flatly. "There's been a string of reports around here. People chase, people vanish, but they never get caught." He didn't need to add more. I understood immediately. I had escaped. By sheer luck, intuition, and adrenaline. The deputy asked me to describe the figures, the stroller, the fog. I did, every detail, and he wrote it down. When I finished, he nodded. "You did exactly the right thing. Didn't stop, didn't step out. Most people don't have that instinct." He left, and I sat back against the wall, hands trembling. My Jeep, parked outside, felt both like a lifeline and a reminder of how close I'd come to disaster. That night, sleep didn't come. Every creak of the apartment, every wind gust, every distant siren kept me awake. My mind kept replaying the fog, the stroller, the hunched figures in the trees. How many people didn't survive similar encounters? How many had fallen for that same bait? I felt both grateful and haunted, aware that the ordinary world could hide extraordinary danger in the smallest, most innocent-looking package. In the days that followed, I drove the same route, cautious and hyper-aware. Every shadow, every roadside object, every glint in the fog made my stomach twist. Tires abandoned on the side of the road, stray boxes, even garbage bags became potential traps in my mind. My friends laughed at my obsession. "You're letting paranoia run your life," one said. But I couldn't shake the memory of that night, the way danger had waited for me under the guise of innocence. Work became mechanical. Nights at the plant blurred together, but the road home remained a gauntlet in my mind. My Jeep's headlights were more than illumination. They were shields, probing the fog for threats. Every curve, every ditch became a mental checklist. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other ready to grip anything at arm's length. One morning, I saw a stroller abandoned at the edge of a parking lot, sunlight streaming through frost-covered windows. My first instinct was to slow, investigate, but years of that night's lesson came back. I slowed only enough to assess from a distance, then drove past. My pulse remained steady, but my hands were tense. Experience, I realized, didn't eliminate fear. It refined instinct. Survival was as much about restraint as it was about action. It occurred to me that the ordinary world wasn't always safe, and danger didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wore a pink blanket, a stroller, a package, a smile. The world seemed harmless because most people accepted appearances, never questioning what sat quietly in their lane, waiting. That awareness, I realized, was a kind of armor, fragile but necessary. Years passed. I still drive those roads occasionally, always alert, always scanning. I still see abandoned objects, and my pulse tightens automatically. But I've learned something deeper. Fear is a tool, and awareness is a shield. The world isn't inherently malevolent, but it isn't inherently safe either. Ordinary moments can mask extraordinary danger. Sometimes I think about the people who weren't as lucky, those who stepped out, those who hesitated, those who assumed innocence. I carry that memory, not as obsession, but as vigilance. I've also learned to trust my instincts, no matter how unreasonable they may seem. If something feels wrong, it probably is. It's easy to assume the world is safe when it looks normal, but danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, disguised in innocence, hiding behind fog and shadows. And sometimes, survival depends on seeing it for what it is. Pay attention, trust your instincts. The ordinary world can hide extraordinary danger, and awareness is often the difference between life and death. I had been working the night shift at the hospital for nearly 8 hours, moving from room to room, checking vitals, calming anxious patients, and filing endless reports. By 1:45 a.m., my body felt like concrete, my mind dulled by the monotony of fluorescent lights and beeping monitors. I took the back roads home, cutting across stretches of farmland to avoid the snarled traffic caused by construction on the highway. The night was unnervingly quiet, broken only by the hum of my car and the occasional owl hoot somewhere in the distance. Fog rolled low across the fields, hugging the ground like it had secrets it didn't want me to see. About 20 minutes into my drive, I approached a small overpass crossing a dry creek bed. I slowed instinctively, my headlights revealing something on the railing. A woman stood there, alone. Her white dress swayed in the weak wind, and she didn't move, didn't react to my headlights. At first I thought she might be suicidal. My foot hovered over the brake, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. Something about her posture, though, screamed wrong, too still, too deliberate. She wasn't afraid of the height. She wasn't reacting to me. I debated calling 911, but I told myself I'd just inch past, report her afterward. As I rolled under the overpass, I caught movement in the ditch beside the road. 3 shadows crouched low, heads turning in unison to track my car. My stomach clenched. The woman wasn't the threat. She was the bait. My pulse skyrocketed, and I hit the gas. The woman's head snapped toward me, too fast, almost inhuman, and she screamed a soundless, angry wail. Behind me, the figures erupted from the darkness, shouting and throwing rocks. The chase had begun, and the road I thought was empty suddenly became a trap. The tires screamed against the asphalt, the engine straining as I floored the gas. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror for more than a second, but the chaos was there. 3 men chasing me, shouts blending into something primal, almost animalistic. One of them hurled a rock that pinged against the trunk, and I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. I had no idea what they wanted, only that I couldn't stop, couldn't slow down. Fog clung to the fields like a wet blanket, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly. My headlights caught glimpses of roadside markers, abandoned barns, and rows of corn swaying in the wind. Every shadow felt alive, and every glint of light made me flinch. My mind raced through scenarios. Was this some kind of robbery? A trap designed for hunters to ambush a driver? Nothing made sense. By the time I reached the next town, my car rattled with the stress of speed and adrenaline. I pulled over, heart hammering, and tried to calm myself. The men had vanished, leaving only the lingering fear coiling in my chest. I dialed the sheriff's office, voice trembling. The dispatcher put me through, and when the sheriff picked up, his calm, almost bored tone made my skin crawl. "Was she dressed in white?" he asked. I nodded slowly, stomach twisting. "Yes," I said, my voice barely audible. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You're not the first, not by far. Drivers report the same thing, same overpass, same time. Always late, always alone, and always followed." I blinked, trying to process the words. Followed by who? By what? The sheriff didn't answer that question. He couldn't. The next day I couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Pale, rigid, white dress swaying, hair covering her face, arms stiff at her sides. I replayed the chase over and over, counting the seconds, the turns, the exact way the men had moved. At work, patients murmured, machines beeped, and my coworkers' voices faded to background noise. Even the coffee machine didn't make sense anymore. I started researching the overpass, trying to understand if this was some local legend or a pattern. Online forums had vague posts. White dress woman. Overpass at Route 82. Drivers warned to stay away. Most dismissed it as urban legend, a trick of fatigue and fog. But the sheriff's calm confirmation haunted me. There were gaps in the story that couldn't be explained. No victims found, no evidence, and no clear motive. Just sightings. By nightfall, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I drove past the overpass slowly, headlights off, testing my fear against reality. Nothing. Silence. Empty road. My mind tried to rationalize, to find a flaw in my memory, but the instinctive terror wouldn't let go. Something had used her figure to lure me. Something had been waiting in the dark. That night I sat at home, staring at my phone. I wanted to call the sheriff, but what could I even say that hadn't already been reported hundreds of times? I knew the truth, and it made me feel small and powerless. Someone, or something, was orchestrating this with patience and intent. Sleep didn't come. Every creak in the house, every shadow outside my window made me flinch. My life had changed in one night, though outwardly, nothing looked different. A week later, curiosity gnawed at me. I told myself I needed closure, needed to understand the overpass. Against every instinct, I drove there again at the same late hour. The fog was heavier, thicker, wrapping the road like a shroud. My headlights cut through it like knives, and there she was, standing on the railing, white dress fluttering faintly. I stopped the car entirely this time, heart in my throat. Her hair hid her face, but her posture was the same, rigid, almost deliberate. I wanted to turn away, to call it a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion, but my feet refused to move. Then I saw the shadows move again in the ditch. 3 men, crouched, waiting. I threw the car in reverse, but one of them dashed into the road. I slammed the accelerator, tires screaming, heart threatening to explode. They chased for blocks before vanishing again, swallowed by the darkness. The woman on the overpass had disappeared as I passed. When I reported it again, The sheriff didn't sound surprised. "They'll never get caught," he said flatly. "We've been trying for years. The woman is the lure. That's all we know. Drivers come, drivers go, and they remain." I realized then that I was no longer just a witness. I was part of the story, part of a cycle I couldn't escape. Fear had become a constant companion, lurking in every shadow. Months passed. I never saw her again, at least not in person, but every foggy road and overpass brought her image to mind. I stopped driving those back roads, always checking reflections, avoiding darkness, and second-guessing my instincts. Sleep came fitfully, with dreams of rigid figures standing silently in white. I learned something important. Fear is real, but inaction can be worse. If I hadn't reacted instinctively, who knows what might have happened? The story isn't just about a ghostly woman or the men in the ditch. It's about vigilance, awareness, and trusting your instincts when something feels off. People walk past danger all the time, convinced it's someone else's problem. I realized too late how easily reality can hide danger in plain sight. It left me with a permanent caution, not paranoia, but respect for the unknown. Danger doesn't announce itself. It waits, silently, until you notice, and sometimes that's the only warning you get.
I've spent enough nights behind the wheel of a delivery van to know the rhythm of rural roads, the way the asphalt hums beneath tires, the way the darkness can feel almost alive if you drive long enough. In 2019, I worked nights delivering parts for a Midwest supplier, a route stretching between Indiana and Illinois. Most nights were quiet, almost painfully so. The cornfields rolled by like ghosts, and the occasional deer would leap into the headlights, reminding me that even the mundane carried danger. October nights were the worst. The wind rattled the cut corn stalks like dry bones brushing against each other, and the smell of fall, wet soil, and fading crops hung heavy. My van was loaded with transmissions and brake pads, and the radio barely filled the silence. I'd learned to talk to myself just to keep awake, joking out loud about nothing, asking rhetorical questions that I never expected answers to. It was the kind of night where your own heartbeat feels too loud, and the hum of the engine seems to sync with it. You start noticing shadows in the trees, wondering if that flash of movement was real or a trick of your mind. That night, I rounded the long curve on County Road 86, headlights cutting through the black, and froze. A motorcycle lay across my lane, chrome glinting faintly in the pale light. It was on its side, but oddly pristine. No skid marks, no blood, no rider. My stomach turned over. My first instinct was to stop, to help, but the scene didn't add up. It felt deliberate. I rolled my window down and called into the night. "Hello? You okay?" Silence answered. Then came the footsteps, slow and deliberate, from the cornfield. I didn't move. My hands gripped the wheel like it was a lifeline. Something wasn't right. The footsteps weren't running, weren't panicked. They were measured, deliberate, as if someone had been waiting for me all along. I scanned the field, my breath fogging the glass, heart hammering against my ribs. Then, movement on the opposite side of the road. A figure rose behind the motorcycle, unfolding from a low crouch like a predator. My gut screamed to reverse. "Stay back," I shouted, though I knew they wouldn't care. The van's locks clicked as I slammed the button. My hands trembled. The cornfield figure stepped onto the asphalt, snapping dry stalks underfoot. I could see nothing but shadow, but I knew I had no time to reason it out. This was no accident. The motorcycle hadn't crashed. It had been bait. I threw the van into reverse, tires squealing across gravel, heart in my throat. The figure by the bike lunged for the handle. Another sprinted out of the cornfield, fast and silent, moving like they'd practiced this before. Adrenaline made my muscles burn. Instinct took over. I didn't look back, just floored the accelerator, spinning tires as I cleared the curve and tore down the road. In the rear view, I caught glimpses of them, two figures standing in the middle of the road, unmoving, watching me disappear. No chase, no panic, just disappointment, like I'd failed their twisted expectation. The road stretched ahead, empty except for the hum of the van and my ragged breathing. When I finally slowed at a distant junction, I called the local sheriff's office. They didn't sound surprised. "You're lucky," the deputy said. "We hear about this stuff a lot. Motorcycles, ATVs, even bicycles left on the side of the road. People stop to help. Sometimes they don't come back." I drove the rest of the night with eyes scanning every shadow, ears straining for the faintest rustle. The fields looked the same, but I knew better now. The next day, the memory clung to me like an itch I couldn't scratch. Every empty road I passed felt like a trap. I found myself leaving earlier, sticking to highways with more traffic, refusing deliveries on the loneliest back roads after sunset. My coworkers laughed when I mentioned it. "You're letting one weird night mess with you?" my supervisor said. "It's just Halloween paranoia." "Paranoia doesn't explain footsteps in the corn," I muttered, mostly to myself, but I couldn't shake it. Even during daylight, the rural roads seemed different, too quiet, too precise. I found myself staring at abandoned bikes along fences, at overturned tractors, anything that might hint at someone setting a trap. People looked at me funny when I slowed down to check a scene that was clearly abandoned. But I couldn't stop. Driving alone, I began rehearsing scenarios in my head. What if they tried again? What if someone else hadn't been so lucky? I imagined stopping at a roadside accident, seeing a motorbike on its side, and realizing too late that the danger was human, not mechanical. The thought made me sweat even in the air-conditioned cab. One night at a diner, I overheard two truckers talking about a similar setup, a downed ATV, no rider, late night. They laughed, but there was an edge in their voices. "If you're dumb enough to stop, they'll get you," one said, shaking his head. I nodded to myself. Dumb enough to stop, that could have been me. By the end of the week, I realized something important. I couldn't trust appearances. Not in the fields, not in the dark, not even when something seemed obvious. The world could hide threats in plain sight, and vigilance was the only defense. Weeks passed, and the memory didn't fade. I started carrying a small flashlight, my phone at the ready, and practiced locking the van while keeping my hands on the wheel. Even so, every quiet back road triggered a tightening of my chest. One night, I passed the same curve on County Road 86. My headlights illuminated the fields like before. My pulse quickened, but I forced my hands steady. No motorcycle, no shadows, just the wind through dead corn. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to relax, but my mind kept scanning for movement. I realized fear wasn't just about danger, it was about control. That night, I stayed vigilant but kept driving. I reminded myself that most people were ordinary, that not every accident on the side of the road was a trap, but vigilance and awareness were habits I couldn't shake. They had saved me once, and I knew they could again. At a rest stop later, I talked to a fellow driver. "Ever get nervous on back roads?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He chuckled. "Every night. But you learn to respect it. A little caution goes a long way. Keep your eyes open, and you'll be fine." I nodded, realizing he was right. Awareness didn't mean paranoia, it meant preparation, not letting assumptions blind you to what might be real. That night, as I drove through quiet stretches with only the hum of my tires, I understood that fear could be a tool, not just a burden. Months later, I'd learned to balance caution and calm. I delivered parts across the Midwest, still driving through empty fields and winding roads, but I moved with a quiet confidence. I knew now that appearances could be deceiving, that sometimes danger was hidden where you least expected it. One evening, I passed an overturned bicycle on a back road. I slowed, eyes scanning, ready to respond, but something felt wrong. My instincts kicked in. I circled around, assessed the scene from a distance, and then called the authorities. They arrived minutes later. It was another setup. This time, I was ready. Driving home afterward, I realized the real lesson wasn't just about danger, it was about attentiveness and responsibility. Life could present traps, yes, but ignoring them or assuming someone else will handle them could be far worse. Fear alone didn't protect me. Awareness, preparedness, and respect for the unknown did. Sometimes, the roads are quiet, the night still, and the fields empty. But vigilance, patience, and a clear head can make all the difference. It's easy to look, but seeing is what saves you. Pay attention to your surroundings and trust your instincts. Life often hides dangers in plain sight, and staying aware, cautious, and proactive can be the difference between safety and disaster. I'd been visiting my father in the hospital all day. He wasn't critical, just older, fragile, and stubbornly refusing help. And I was tired from hours in sterile waiting rooms. By the time I left, it was past 1:30 a.m., and the Pennsylvania backroads felt endless. These were the kind of roads that twisted through dense woods, where trees leaned close enough to brush against the van, and phone service vanished for stretches of miles. Rain fell steadily, slicking the asphalt and making headlights shimmer like oil on black glass. The wipers squeaked in rhythm with my heartbeat, and the van's tires hummed on wet pavement. I was alone, grateful for the quiet at first, until the darkness began to feel oppressive. Every shadow seemed alive. Every bend in the road carried the possibility of something or someone waiting. I'd driven these roads before, but not at this hour, not in this rain, not with my mind weighed down by hospital corridors and the smell of antiseptic. The isolation sharpened my senses. My eyes scanned the tree line for movement, my hands tightening on the wheel. Then, out of nowhere, high beams caught a figure standing in the middle of the road. A man, completely still, arms hanging at his sides. No shivering, no pleading, no staggering, just standing. My stomach dropped. People in distress don't stand like mannequins. I rolled the window down a fraction. "Sir, are you okay?" My voice sounded small in the drizzle. The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, and I noticed the shapes behind him, too crouched, hidden in the brush, human, motionless. My heart thumped like a jackhammer. Something about the scene didn't make sense. The man wasn't waving, calling, or signaling for help. The two shapes in the grass didn't twitch, breathe, or move naturally. My gut screamed, this wasn't an accident. This was a setup. "Okay," I muttered to myself, gripping the wheel tighter. "Don't get out. Don't stop." The man in the road shifted, stepping closer. His soaked clothes clung to him unnaturally, revealing the stiff line of his body. A shiver ran down my spine. I looked at the figures in the brush. They mirrored every slight movement. They had rehearsed this, and I was the target. I pressed my foot against the brake lightly, keeping a safe distance. My mind raced. I couldn't call anyone, service was gone, and the van's radio only hummed. I thought about my father, alone in the hospital, and a surge of determination pushed me to react. The man in the road took another step, and the hidden figures began crawling forward, moving as if rehearsed. The closer they got, the more I realized just how exposed I was. Every instinct screamed to get out, but my mind overrode it. These people weren't victims, they were predators, and they wanted me to stop. I glanced at the rearview mirror, spotting them faintly in the reflection. There was no hesitation. I knew in that instant that any movement outside the van could cost me. Fear sharpened my senses into a single focus. Escape. I slammed the van into reverse, tires squealing, ABS screaming against the wet asphalt. The man in the road lunged for the door handle, and I yanked the wheel, spinning the rear wheels across the rain-slicked surface. One of the figures in the brush sprinted out, snapping dry branches underfoot. Adrenaline burned through me as I shifted into full reverse, aiming for the curve ahead. Every second felt stretched. Every heartbeat felt like it would burst through my chest. The figures moved unnaturally fast, yet suddenly, they paused, as if expecting me to freeze in panic. Come on, I muttered, barely noticing the words leave my mouth. The tires bit into the wet pavement, carrying me away from the edge of the woods and their dark silhouettes. I glanced in the mirror, heart hammering. For a moment, I saw all three standing in the roadman and two hidden watchers. They didn't chase, didn't panic, just watched. I floored the accelerator, letting the rain lash my windshield as I gained distance. By the time I reached a gas station 40 minutes later, my hands were numb, my legs shaky. I called the sheriff immediately. The deputy's voice came calm but firm. "We can't patrol that area tonight. Roads are washed out, no signal for miles. You did the right thing by not stopping." I sat in the van, drenched, trembling, realizing how close I'd come. My fear hadn't paralyzed me, it had focused me. The next morning, I avoided that route entirely. My usual shortcuts now seemed dangerous, and even familiar roads carried a new tension. At work, co-workers teased me about paranoid night driving. But I couldn't shake the memory. I kept replaying the scene, the perfect stillness, the rehearsed movements of the figures, the unnatural timing of everything. I realized how easy it was to assume the world was benign, to stop for someone on a lonely road, to trust appearances. In truth, danger can hide in plain sight. and people often mask intentions behind ordinary acts. Even weeks later, I found myself driving with extra caution. A deer crossing would make me tense. A broken-down car would get a careful scan before approaching. My awareness was constant, instinctive. It had saved me once, and I wasn't going to risk forgetting it. One night at a diner, I told a fellow driver, "You ever see something weird on back roads?" He nodded. Every night. People underestimate how dangerous quiet roads can be. Keep your eyes open. Don't assume anything. It's easy to get hurt if you're polite. I agreed. Politeness could kill. Awareness could save. The memory of those figures, man and hidden watchers, reminded me that vigilance is survival. Months passed, and the roads remained as winding and dark as ever, but I no longer drove with naive confidence. I kept emergency supplies in the van, my phone charged, headlights high, and reflexes sharp. Every time I passed a lonely curve or a slick patch of asphalt, I scanned the tree line, considering what could be waiting. I never saw them again, but the memory stayed vivid, like a scar on the mind. I realized that danger often arrives disguised as the ordinary: a stranded motorist, a broken-down bike, a motionless figure. They can all hide malicious intent. Driving through the Allegheny backroads taught me that fear, when combined with awareness, becomes a tool. You can't predict everything, but preparation and vigilance make a real difference. I never stopped caring about others, but I learned to protect myself first. Not every situation is what it appears to be. Trust your instincts, stay aware of your surroundings, and remember that caution can save your life. Safety often comes from seeing clearly, even when fear makes your mind scream to look away. Winter 2021 inches northern Michigan was relentless. Snow fell in sheets, blanketing the small towns I delivered linens to, coating the roads until they were unrecognizable. I had been driving these routes for years, but that winter felt different. Every night, I left the warmth of my apartment to navigate drifts that swallowed the edges of the asphalt. My van groaned under the weight of frozen tires and half-frozen roads, and my breath fogged the windshield even with the heater on full blast. I remember one night clearly. The storm had intensified by dusk, and I was delivering linens to a client in a town so small it didn't even appear on my GPS correctly. The system rerouted me down a narrow forest road I had never driven before, a single lane cut through towering pines. Snow clung to the branches in heavy clumps, weighing them down like frozen fingers reaching toward the road. The silence was almost suffocating. As I drove slowly, headlights cutting through the white haze, I thought I saw something unusual. At first, I assumed it was a snowbank, maybe a fallen tree, but the shape resolved into a *** yellow school bus ***, parked sideways across the road, blocking the entire lane. Its windows were fogged, the hazard lights blinking slowly. My stomach twisted. No tracks led to it, no footprints in the snow, no signs of life. "Hello?" I called softly, my voice barely carrying over the wind. Nothing, just the rhythmic blink of hazard lights. I eased my van forward, preparing to reverse, but the tires sank into the snow. My phone had no service. I tried to rationalize it. Someone must be inside, a stranded driver. "Yeah, that's it," I muttered to myself. My mind refused to accept the silent, lifeless presence I felt around the bus. Then, movement. I froze. A tall silhouette slowly moved inside the bus, gliding down the aisle. It wasn't a kid, not even close. The shape was elongated, almost unnaturally thin, and it stopped near the back, perfectly still behind the foggy glass. I turned off my headlights, hoping it wouldn't notice me, but the darkness made the figures outside visible. 2 more figures had appeared, one on each side of the road, just beyond the range of my van's beams. I could see them clearly now. Tall, still, facing me. Not a single sound. No crunch of snow. Nothing. My pulse surged in my ears. I had no way to escape. My mind screamed at me to back up, but the snow trapped me like a cage. "Stay calm. It's just people. Stranded. Just stranded," I whispered to myself, teeth chattering. Then, the figure inside the bus moved again. Simultaneously, the 2 outside stepped forward, a single, synchronized motion. Snow didn't crunch beneath them. My stomach dropped. I panicked. The van keys were in my hand. I jammed the ignition and rammed the corner of the bus. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and the vehicle lurched just enough for me to squeeze past. I glanced inside through the emergency exit I had smashed open. No seats, no interior, only a hollow shell and dozens of adult-sized footprints etched into the wooden floor. I hit the gas, heart hammering, convinced they were following me, shadows moving just at the edge of my peripheral vision. When I finally reached the main highway, the lights of distant towns made me feel slightly safer. I called the police as soon as I could, but they didn't find a thing. No bus, no footprints, no tracks, just snow, untouched, pristine as if the incident had never occurred. One trooper pulled me aside, lowering his voice. "You're lucky you didn't get out. Drivers go missing out there every few years. We find their cars. Never them." I quit night shifts the next week. Even days after the event, I couldn't shake the image of that bus. Every time I drove through snowy roads, my hands gripped the wheel tighter. I replayed the figures in my mind, the one inside, moving unnaturally, and the two waiting outside, perfectly synchronized. I couldn't rationalize it. I was a practical man. I believed in logic, but nothing explained what I had seen. At home, I researched missing drivers in northern Michigan. Old news clippings detailed roads where drivers vanished, sometimes leaving behind cars abandoned in snow. No explanations. No signs of foul play, just empty forest stretches that seemed alive in a way words couldn't describe. I realized I had been lucky, or maybe cursed. Friends suggested I had hallucinated it. Exhaustion, isolation, winter storms, maybe. But I knew what I saw. I could still feel their presence, the slow, deliberate watching, and something about the bus itself seemed wrong. The hollow interior, the footprints, the absence of any living passengers. That winter, I refused to travel alone at night. Even familiar routes felt different. Every stretch of dark road reminded me of that moment, of the van inches from the bus, of the synchronized step of the figures outside. I became hyper-aware of shadows, reflective surfaces, anything that could hide movement. Sleep came, reluctantly. I knew I had survived because of instinct, not luck. My mind clung to every detail, every small decision. Turning off the headlights, ramming the bus, accelerating past it. Every decision kept me alive. But the images haunted me. The forest was no longer just trees and snow. It was waiting, and it never forgot. Weeks later, I returned to night shifts, but only in well-lit urban areas, roads with cell service. I avoided the woods entirely. Every time my route brought me near dense forest, my chest tightened, palms sweating. The bus, the figures, the synchronized steps, they were etched in my memory. I couldn't erase them. A coworker asked why I avoided northern deliveries. "Snow's dangerous," I said casually. "Too risky." I didn't mention the bus, the hollow shell, or the synchronized figures. Who would believe me? Even the police couldn't find it. They probably thought I had imagined it, but I knew better. And the fear wasn't just in my mind. Sometimes, at home, I would glance at shadows in my apartment or hear sounds from the empty hallways, and my body would react before my brain even processed the thought. It became clear that the experience had changed me. I no longer trusted empty roads at night. I no longer assumed safety where none was guaranteed. And I learned a strange, almost unpleasant appreciation for the fragile nature of life. One wrong turn, one delayed reaction, one misjudged shadow could end everything. The bus had disappeared, but it left something behind, a lesson in vigilance, in instinct, and in respect for the unknown. Even now, years later, I remember the snow, the forest, and the silent bus. I never returned to night deliveries in remote areas. I never ignored a gut feeling, and I never, ever assumed roads were empty just because they looked quiet. Sometimes people scoff at fear, call it paranoia, but fear is survival. My experience taught me that. The bus, the figures, the footprints, they may have been supernatural, or they may have been a carefully staged trap, or maybe something far beyond my understanding, but the lesson remains. Trust your instincts, respect isolation, prepare for the unexpected. I also realized another truth. Some dangers aren't in statistics, aren't in snow depth or road width. They are in timing, awareness, and perception. Life can change in a single instant. A road you think is empty may not be. A shadow you ignore may be waiting. And sometimes, the only thing between survival and disaster is your own presence of mind. I quit night shifts for good after that winter. I'm grateful I survived, And I carry that lesson with me every time I drive through dark roads, even in daylight. Some experiences leave permanent marks, but they also teach you how to stay alive. Trust your instincts, respect the unknown, and never underestimate the value of vigilance. Life can change in a moment, and preparedness is as important as courage. 2 summers ago, I worked the night shift at the power plant just outside our county. The shifts were long and dull, but the drive home through the old county loop always gave me a strange mix of peace and unease. The loop was a 22-mile stretch with nothing but forested roads, crumbling guardrails, and the occasional abandoned farmhouse. No streetlights, no houses for miles, just black asphalt winding through darkness. It was around 1 a.m. that night, the moon hiding behind thick clouds. My headlights barely cut through the fog settling over the road. I kept my speed low, partly out of habit, partly because the wind howled through the trees, and every sound felt amplified in that quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you imagine things. I rounded a gentle curve, and something white flashed in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was a tarp, maybe debris from a farm. But as I rolled closer, my stomach sank. It wasn't debris. It was a wedding dress spreading out perfectly across the asphalt. Lace fanned in a circle, pristine and undisturbed. I slowed to a crawl. My hands gripped the wheel tight, and I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe some weird prank. But something about the stillness of it, so far from civilization, made my gut twist. It didn't look like it had been there long, and the shape underneath it, I realized too late that it was a human-sized form. My heart jumped. I debated stopping. I debated driving faster. My instincts screamed both ways at the same time. Then, movement on the roadside. 3 figures crouched low in the grass and behind mile markers, motionless, watching. The dress wasn't covering a victim. It was bait. I froze, trying to convince myself that it was someone messing around, maybe teens pulling a prank. But the figures didn't laugh. They didn't wave. They didn't move like kids, too deliberate, too silent. I could barely make out a glint in one hand, something metallic, a pipe, a crowbar. My pulse hammered. I eased forward, inching past the dress, hoping they wouldn't react. My headlights reflected off the asphalt, illuminating their shadows. They shifted closer, slow, predatory movements, like stalking prey. My mind raced. I couldn't stop. I couldn't go back. Come on, I muttered under my breath, gripping the wheel tight. My legs shook. The dress spun slightly in the breeze from my tires. One of them lunged, impossibly fast, a silhouette blurring toward the van. I slammed the gas. Tires squealed. I clipped the edge of the dress. It flew into the air like a ghostly sheet. The figures exploded forward, sprinting, but I managed to wedge the van between them and the roadside. The engine roared. My heart roared louder. The next few seconds were a blur of motion and adrenaline. I shot past them, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the figures stood in the road again, unmoving, watching me. The wedding dress settled around their feet like a shroud. I kept driving, barely breathing, until I hit the main highway. Streetlights, cars, civilization. My hands still shook. My brain kept replaying the dress, the figures, the way they moved. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The police were skeptical at first. They checked the county loop later. No footprints. No evidence. Only the faint marks of tires where I had brushed the dress. Over the next week, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my apartment, every shadow on the road, made me flinch. I started reading police reports. Turns out, this wasn't an isolated thing. Other drivers had reported similar setups: children's coats on roads, duffel bags, backpacks, objects placed strategically to force drivers to stop, to get out, usually in remote areas, always late at night. When I called the sheriff's office to describe the wedding dress, the deputy's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's a new one," he said. "But whoever's doing this, they're getting bolder." I couldn't shake the image of those 3 figures. I visualized the dress fanned across the road, the silent coordination of the attackers, their inhuman speed when I moved forward. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see them inching closer, glinting metal in hand. Friends tried to calm me down. "It's probably just someone trying to scare you," they said. "You're imagining things." But I couldn't dismiss it. I knew what I had seen. I avoided that loop road completely after that night, taking longer, unfamiliar routes home. Each night drive reminded me of how quickly a normal evening could turn terrifying. The dress, the form under it, the predators in the dark, it all replayed in my mind. Like a movie I couldn't stop watching. It wasn't just fear. It was the realization of how fragile safety really is. How quickly normal life can turn threatening when someone with intent decides it should. Weeks later, I tried returning to a semblance of normal life. I drove home from the plant along lit highways, avoiding shortcuts. But the memory stayed. The eerie stillness of the loop road, the way the dress was laid so deliberately, the figures' synchronized movements. The metallic glint in one hand, I began noticing patterns everywhere. The slightest shadow behind trees, something lying strangely in the road, a discarded coat on a curb. Every night, every drive, my mind scanned for setups, for traps, for hidden danger. One night, a coworker joked about the haunted loop stories circulating online. I laughed, but inside, my stomach turned. I knew what was real and what was speculation. The fear wasn't over. It wasn't paranoia. It was awareness. The police advised reporting anything suspicious immediately. I did always. But the reality was, even law enforcement couldn't always catch these people. They could plan, they could hide, they could manipulate fear itself. And as far as I knew, no one had been caught placing objects to trap drivers. Not yet. Driving at night became a study in survival. I learned to trust instincts, to slow for anomalies, to never assume the road was empty. Every night, my mind replayed what could have happened if I had stopped. Every night, I thanked myself for reacting fast. Even now, I avoid the loop road entirely. I stick to well-lit highways, urban routes, and anything with traffic. I know the dress, the figures, the predators in the dark, they're still out there, somewhere. And I know I was lucky, extremely lucky. One misstep and I might have been another missing person. This experience changed how I see the world. I learned that danger isn't always obvious. It doesn't always make noise. It doesn't always follow the rules. And sometimes, the most innocent-looking object, the dress, a coat, a backpack, can conceal deadly intent. The lesson is simple but critical. Asterisk, trust your instincts, respect your surroundings, and never assume safety just because you're careful. Asterisk, awareness can save your life. And sometimes, the difference between survival and tragedy is split-second decision-making and recognizing that what looks harmless may hide something sinister. I never drive that road at night again, and I always scan the dark edges of the road before slowing down. Danger can be disguised as innocence. Trust your instincts, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the value of quick thinking in unexpected situations.